Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Nidar Gvir, coming up in today's newscast. New National Security Minister Itamar Gvir making a surprise visit to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The new coalition holds its first work meeting, with Netanyahu saying there is not a moment to waste. And Israel ranked in the top 10 most powerful countries in the world, according to the U.S. News and World Report annual rankings. One day after hardline National Security Minister Itamar Gvir announced he would visit the Temple Mount in the coming weeks, he made a surprise visit to the site. Let's take a look. Israel's new National Security Minister Itamar Gvir visited the Temple Mount on Tuesday morning in a surprise visit. He made the trip one day after he publicly announced delayed plans to do so following a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu Monday evening. He arrived with heavy security coordinated in advance with the police and kept secret. Upon arriving, Gvir said that the government would not succumb to Hamas threats, reiterating that the Temple Mount is the most important site for the people of Israel, and saying we will maintain freedom of movement for Muslims and Christians, but also Jews will ascend the mount. He added that those who make threats will be dealt with an iron fist. The decision to visit the site was reportedly made during his meeting with Netanyahu on Monday. Gvir insisted on a visit to the Temple Mount, saying that the government must not capitulate to Hamas terror threats of retaliation, and Netanyahu reportedly did not object to the visit, as was previously reported in Hebrew media. Gvir initially announced his intention to visit the site on Sunday as he took on his new role as National Security Minister. Following the announcement, the Gaza-based terror organization Hamas threatened that Gvir's pilgrimage would ignite the region and warned it would not stand idly by. The Palestinian Authority also condemned the visit in a statement, calling it an unprecedented provocation. On Monday, opposition leader and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid also spoke out against Gvir's intended visit, saying people will die.
אסור שאיתמר בן גביר יעלה להר הבית. זו התגרות שתוביל לאלימות שתסכן חיי אדם ותעלה בחיי אדם. עם כל זה שביבי חלש, הוא מוכרח הפעם לעמוד ולהגיד לו, אתה לא עולה להר הבית כי ימותו אנשים.
Yet, despite the threats and warnings, Gvir's visit to the Temple Mount occurred in full consultation and approval of Israeli security forces and without incident. Though now, Israel will likely be on high alert for retaliation by terror organizations following the visit. And joining us now with more on Gvir's visit to the Temple Mount is Yehuda Glick, president of the Shalom Jerusalem Foundation, a former member of Knesset for the Likud, and a Temple Mount activist. Thank you for joining us.
Shalom Lidar from Jerusalem.
So Yehuda, let's start with the obvious. Why go to the Temple Mount with all the world's eyes on the new government? Why now? Why risk igniting the region?
Lidar, as you said, let's start with the obvious. There's never been any minister of the interior security, who did not go onto Temple Mount. Today is the Jewish day we commemorate the beginning of the destruction of the temple, the beginning of the siege by Nebuchadnezzar 2,500 years ago. And I think there's nothing more obvious than a Jew going onto the Temple Mount on this day, and especially the person who's in charge of the security there, to go and see with his own eyes.
Now, this move has drawn international condemnation. Netanyahu was forced to issue a statement saying that he supports the status quo on the Temple Mount and delay his trip to the United Arab Emirates. Was this maybe the wrong time for such a visit?
First of all, as far as I understand, the delay on the trip to the United Arab Emirates was nothing to do with the visit to Temple Mount. It was just the technical issues, as far as I saw the spokesman of the United Emirates. But I can say that there's never a good time in the Middle East. They're always warning you, and they're always threatening that if who knows what's going to happen. I remember when Israel closed down the Orient House in Jerusalem, or when they built the new neighborhood called Har Choma. They were always warning and threatening that who knows what's going to happen in the Third World War. I can tell you, as far as I know, Third World War has not broken out because of this visit. I think postponing it would just to get time for people who want to encourage violence to get themselves prepared. We have to remember that Jewish people, or anybody, any believer in God, any believer in the Bible, who goes up to the Temple Mount, this is the place, it's the holiest place in the world for billions of believers in the Bible. This is the house of God in the world. Hashem chose this place to rest his divine presence, and it's only obvious that we should go there. And if we bow down and are afraid from the shadow of every single threat by terror, then we're not going to make any achievements in this area. We have to get the world used to the fact that Temple Mount is a house of prayer for all nations, and we have to change the music on the Temple Mount. I would say that right now the new government has an obligation to change the music. That visiting, praying, this should be the music we hear on Temple Mount, and let's make Temple Mount holy again. Let's make sure the place is a place of prayer and not a place of violence. We should condemn violence on Temple Mount and not condemn people who are visiting or people who are praying.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that you visited the Temple Mount today as well. I mean, how is the atmosphere now in the Temple Mount after Ben Gvir's visit?
I had the privilege of visiting yesterday. I had the privilege of visiting today. And I can tell you that the place is quiet. And not only is it quiet, there were thousands and thousands of tourists from Italy, from Germany, from the Philippines, from the United States, from all over the United States. Many groups. The place is quiet the way it should be. A holy place. People are going up there praying. We had a group of 100 Jews praying there this morning. I think that's the beauty of the place, that many people can pray. It's a place of diversity. It's the world center of peace, and we have to change the music also on the media, not only on the ground. We have to show people when they hear the word Temple Mount, their first association should be of holiness, of prayer, of the music of God, and not that a certain time you hear the word Temple Mount, you immediately associate it with violence and terror and threats.
Now, I want to ask, because
that's the real situation.
Yeah. Because you yourself have visited the Temple Mount on many, many previous occasions, and you were personally targeted for this. I mean, do you think that Ben Gvir has now placed a target on his back?
There's been a target on his back for several years already, and I think that we should once again remind ourselves that the ones who are to be blamed for violence are the violent people, those who incite them, and those who give them any kind of justification. Unless we want to live in a world where we're blaming the woman who was raped for her rape, we should not at all use the terminology of putting the blame on the ones who are the victims. Those who are using terror, they are to be blamed. And the visiting Temple Mount by the Minister of National Security is a natural thing. The visiting Temple Mount by people who come to pray is a natural thing. And we have to, as I said, we have to let the Temple Mount be holy again, and we have to make sure that visiting the Temple Mount
so
is obvious.
You're advocating, though, for a change in the status quo.
I'm advocating for calling for people of all religions who believe in the Bible to come up to the Temple Mount and worship it with respecting one another. I don't know what the status quo is. I've been ascending Temple Mount for 40 years. I don't know one day that is alike to the other day. I don't know I've never heard of what the status quo is. Every single day is different. What we have to strive is that the place should be a peaceful place, a holy place, and the music that should be heard there is music of prayer. And I encourage all people who know how to respect others and want to pray in the holiest place in the world, but for the Bible, come to the Temple Mount, and let's make the place the throne of God in this world, the world center for Shalom, God's name.
All right, Yehuda Glick, thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you so much, Lidar, and we want to wish the new government a good success. Its success is the success of the people of Israel as a source of blessing to the entire world.
Amen. Now, the new government kicking off its first work meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu back in the Prime Minister's chair. The details in the following report. Prime Minister Netanyahu kicking off his new government's first work meeting by slamming the previous government's progress.
הממשלה הקודמת לא הייתה מאוחדת סביב שום מטרה לאומית. הייתה להם רק מטרה אחת, למנוע את הרגע הזה. מעבר לכך, שום דבר. כל אחד משך לכיוון אחר, והמדינה עמדה במקום. כתוצאה מכך הצטברו בעיות רבות וחוסר מעש מוחלט של הממשלה הקודמת בתחומים רבים. חוסר מעש בביטחון, במשילות, בכלכלה ובקידום השלום.
Netanyahu said that his government is different in that it is united with clear national goals and vowed it would act differently. The prime minister said he would act in an open and powerful manner in the international community towards preventing an Iranian nuclear deal.
לצערי, בניגוד לדעה הרווחת, שהסכם הגרעין המסוכן הזה ירד מהפרק, אחרי האירועים האחרונים באיראן, אני חושב שהאפשרות הזאת עדיין לא ירדה סופית מהפרק. ולכן נעשה הכל כדי למנוע את החזרה להסכם הרע הזה שמוביל לאיראן גרעינית בחסות בינלאומית. כמו כן אנחנו נפעל ביתר שאת למנוע התבססות איראנית צבאית בסוריה ובמקומות אחרים, ואנחנו לא מחכים.
The prime minister also said his government would bring back personal security to all Israelis, both Jews and Arabs.
אנחנו מאוחדים במאבק ביוקר המחיה. אנחנו נפעל להקל על אזרחי ישראל שספגו עליות מחירים קשות בשנה האחרונה.
Netanyahu also said his government was united in promoting and expanding the circle of peace in the region.
אנחנו מאוחדים בהרחבת מעגל השלום, דבר שאני בטוח מאחד את כל אזרחי ישראל. אנחנו נחושים גם להעמיק את הסכמי השלום הקיימים עם 6 מדינות ערב, וגם להוסיף להם פריצות דרך היסטוריות עם מדינות ערב נוספות באזור.
Netanyahu concluded the meeting by saying,
יש לנו הרבה מה לעשות, ואין לנו זמן לבזבז. תודה רבה לכם.
And now tragic news. 19-year-old Corporal Baruch Kabrata has been identified by the IDF as a soldier killed in a tragic accident on a military base. In a tragic incident, the Israel Defense Forces revealed Tuesday morning that an IDF soldier was accidentally killed overnight on a base near Jerusalem after being injured by weapons fire. After resuscitation efforts, the soldier was pronounced dead. According to initial Hebrew media reports, the soldier was killed due to a tragic incident of gun negligence by a fellow soldier. The military police launched an investigation into the incident, of which the circumstances are still unclear, and will submit its findings to the Military Advocate General. And now the new Israeli foreign minister received a congratulatory call from U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. In the call, Blinken emphasized the U.S. commitment to Israel's security and the Abraham Accords. They also discussed areas where there are differences, including the Iranian nuclear agreement and the commitment to the two-state solution. ILTV Steve Leibovitz reports.
Secretary Blinken's first call with the Israeli foreign minister was reportedly first cordial and then down to business. They spoke about America's long-standing commitment to Israeli security and ways to expand the Abraham Accords. Blinken went on to emphasize the U.S. commitment to reopening negotiations with Iran on its nuclear program and to the two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians. The coalition agreement includes the expansion of Israeli settlement in Judea and Samaria and the legalization of existing outposts, as well as the annexation of some areas. Blinken reportedly said that the U.S. opposes any policies that undermine a solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. The coalition agreement also includes a clause that allows Netanyahu to block annexation as he seeks to normalize ties with Saudi Arabia. In his first days in office, Cohen emphasized plans to expand the Abraham Accords to include more Arab countries. The Prime Minister has said that shared concerns about Iran can eventually lead to normalizing relations with the most powerful Arab nation, Saudi Arabia.
And moving on, the UN Human Rights Council kicked off the new year. Who are its newest members? Well, countries such as Cuba, Qatar, China, Sudan, Eritrea, Algeria, Somalia, Vietnam, Pakistan, and others, all exemplary models of human rights. This is the latest after the world body overwhelmingly voted last week to ask the International Court of Justice to take a stand on the legal status of the so-called Israeli occupation. Its obsession with Israel continuing. And once again, seriously calling into question the legitimacy of the UN and its resolutions. Joining us now to discuss all of this is Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of the United Nations Watch. Hillel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So let's start with the UN Human Rights Council. I mean, how do you explain the fact that 70% of its members are non-democratic councils with, many with major human rights violations of their own.
Look, Lidar, I believe the world needs a credible human rights council to defend millions of victims in places like Iran, Syria, North Korea, who are suffering arbitrary executions, torture, imprisonment, rape, and they need to be defended. When the world elects regimes that you mentioned, like China, Cuba, Pakistan, to its highest human rights body, that's like naming Al Capone and his gang to fight organized crime. It's a betrayal.
And I mean, this double standard, how can the world be expected to take the Council's decisions seriously?
There is a serious credibility gap, as you mentioned, when 70% of the members of the UN Human Rights Council are either full-on tyrannies, like China and Cuba, that are police states, authoritarian regimes like Qatar and Pakistan that mistreat women, migrants. It's very hard for the world to take it seriously, and it raises questions about how they can even implement mandates that are positive, like they created an inquiry on Iran. Who's going to be running the inquiry? When you know who the members of the Human Rights Council are, it raises questions, it undermines the credibility of the entire operation.
And we know that the UN in general, and the UN Human Rights Council in particular, has this sort of, let's call it an obsession with Israel. We've seen countless resolutions on Israel, while other, nations have received, nations with really questionable human rights records have received zero resolutions about them. Why do you believe this is the case? Why this obsession with Israel?
Well, there are many factors at play. These resolutions are introduced by the Arab and Islamic states, historically to deflect attention from their own records, and it's their narrative to demonize Israel. And they have the power. They have the oil historically. Countries vote with them for that. There's vote trading. The Islamic nations are 56 nations. The Jewish countries, there's just one. Countries are afraid of inviting terrorism if they dare to be the few who will stand against this automatic majority against Israel. And let's face it, there's also today what we call the new anti-Semitism. If once in the Middle Ages, when there was the Black Plague, they said the Jew is poisoning the wells, today if there's human rights abuse and problems in the world, it's the Jewish state that gets the General Assembly last year. We had one resolution on Iran, one on North Korea, one on Syria, and 15 on the Jewish state. So there's no question that Israel today plays the role of the Jewish scapegoat.
Mm-hmm. And now I want to also ask about the recent vote in the UN General Assembly against Israel. Even some of Israel's newest allies, as you mentioned, some of the Arab states, voting against us. What does Israel need to do at the UN to change this ridiculous obsession, or is this going to continue to be the norm?
Well, it's been the norm for many years, and you mentioned the new Arab states. It's hard to expect them to vote for Israel when even countries that Israel has excellent bilateral relations with for many years, countries like Singapore or others, vote against Israel. So it has become the default, and Israel needs to work hard to change it. It's very much an uphill battle. It has to begin with Israel's closest allies. In the democratic world, sometimes, last week, countries like Germany, Canada, Australia, they voted for Israel. Others, like Luxembourg, did not. And Israel has to make the case among its allies, and it's obviously continues to be very much an uphill battle. But countries need to realize that this obsession is not only bad for the peace process, polarizes the Israeli and Arab sides, but it's bad for the world. All this time spent on demonizing Israel is time not spent on human rights abuses in Zimbabwe, in Cuba, and Pakistan, and that's part of the strategy of these countries.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Hillel, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and for the work that you do in the UN.
Thank you.
And now moving on, the heads of leading Zionist and Jewish institutions in Israel and the diaspora have sent a letter to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressing deep concern about possible plans to change the law of return. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The leaders of the Jewish Agency, Jewish Federations, the World Zionist Organization, and Keren Hayesod all signed the unprecedented joint letter warning the Prime Minister against moves by the new government to alter the law of return to restrict immigration to Israel by descendants of Jews who are not themselves Jewish. The letter stressed the importance of Jewish unity and raised what it called deep concern that certain members of the new government could impact the diaspora by changing the long-standing status quo on religious affairs in general and the law of return in particular. The warning, any change could unravel ties between us and keep us away from each other. Signees included Israeli and diaspora leaders. It was signed by Jewish Agency Chair Doron Almog, Chair of the Jewish Agency Board of Governors Mark Wilf, and the Chair of the WZO Yaakov Hagoel, who is a member of Netanyahu's Likud party. The non-binding coalition agreements refer to some changes in the law of return, specifically its grandchild clause, which grants citizenship to anyone with at least one Jewish grandparent, provided they do not practice another religion. The Orthodox parties believe the law allows too many non-Jews to immigrate, threatening the Jewish identity of the state.
And the high cost of living in Israel continuing to make headlines as the Bank of Israel and the new government seek to tackle the problem. The Bank of Israel increased the interest rate by an additional 0.5% on Monday to reach 3.75%, its highest rate since 2008. The move was in line with most economists' predictions, who believe the interest rate will continue to rise in 2023. In April, policymakers began raising the rate from 0.1%, and economists project the rate will rise to above 4% within a year's time. Yet despite the rate increase, Israel's annual inflation rose to a 14-year high of 5.3% in November, well above the government's target range of 1 to 3%, though still lower than many other Western countries. Bank of Israel Governor Amir Yaron said at a press conference announcing the hike that the central bank is determined to reduce the inflation rate and return it to within target range. The new government has pledged to address the high cost of living in Israel as a priority. As such, Yaron called on the new government to act responsibly with regard to its fiscal policy. He also said that the Israeli economy cannot take for granted the high regard from the rating entities and international financial institutions. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday blamed his predecessor, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid, for the high cost of living and vowed to act to address the issue. In response, Lapid tweeted that according to The Economist, he passed along the fourth strongest economy in the OECD, and said that the fact that you decided to hand out all the money to your extortionist partners is your problem. Israel has made it into the top 10 list of the most powerful countries in the world, compiled by U.S. News and World Report. Rounding out the list in the number 10 slot, Israel was ranked one of the most powerful countries in the world by U.S. News and World Report. The United States came in first, followed by China and Russia for the top three. Then Germany ranked fourth, followed by the United Kingdom, South Korea, France, and Japan. The United Arab Emirates, Israel's new Abraham Accords partner, took the number 9 slot. According to U.S. News, the world's most powerful countries also are the ones that consistently dominate news headlines, preoccupy policymakers, and shape global economic patterns. Their foreign policies and military budgets are tracked religiously. When they make a pledge, at least some in the international community trust they will keep it. These countries project their influence on the world stage. Israel also received a very high military rating of 91.1, in fourth place and just behind Russia, the United States, and China, respectively. The small Jewish state also ranked 15th in the movers category, that is, the ones to watch, based on a country's ability to weather challenges posed by the global economy. Overall, Israel ranked 37th on the list of best countries in the world, down from 30th in 2021. The honor of the best country in the world went to Switzerland, followed by Germany and Canada. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies expected around the country tonight and tomorrow, with lows this evening averaging a cooler 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, highs remaining steady, seeing top temperatures of 19 degrees Celsius or 66 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Ladar Gvir. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.